topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hi, I am Shelby Wagner, host of the show Learning to Dance in the Rain, and I welcome you today to my program. Thank you for tuning in here, and I think we'll have a lot of fun today with my guests, whom I'll introduce in a moment. I am an award-winning author of two books. One is called Learning to Dance in the Rain, Surviving Grief, Internet Dating and Romance Scams, along the bottom, I think. And they can be purchased from Amazon or any place that bookstore that can order it for you. The Learning to Dance in the Rain and my show and the book, are designed the goal is to help you learn resilience. But today, it's kind of an entertaining show. And today, I want to introduce an author, T.R. Michaud. And T.R. is a calibration technician in the daytime, and he lives in Massachusetts. And he's a self-published author the rest of the time. He is a lover of a good fantasy adventure, whether it's a book or a movie, and a cup of coffee will satisfy him for several hours. His books, stories are set in medieval time, and he has a passion for both fantasy, medieval tales, and this began at an early age. And he was introduced to Dungeons and Dragons when he was 12 years old, and now he is telling stories along the same line. Hello there, TR. Come on out and tell us about yourself. How are you doing today?
Good. Nice to see you, Miss Wagner. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. We're having another beautiful fall day here in Michigan, and the sun's shining, and we're happy about it. So, tell me, what is it about fantasy that turns your passion on?
I have been a fantasy fan for a long time. I'm 52 years old. I got to say, when I started watching TV and could comprehend pretty much what I was watching, it was either football or fantasy, with hockey sprinkled in between that. I love fantasy. I've always loved fantasy. I love the world building of fantasy. I love the characters of fantasy. I love the plots of, good versus evil in fantasy.
Well, I can share that. How did you, let's see, at 12, well, you said when you started playing Dungeons and Dragons, I believe it said you would disappear with some friends into a room and spend the whole day playing. So how did that go? I bought that game for my son and daughter, and they're just about your age. And I didn't know how to play it. I couldn't find any information about it. Well, then someone told me the other day that, there was a book that went along with it that explained the story and how you build your own story. So you tell me, what did you do in that room all day?
Yeah, so when I first, it's kind of comical because when I first started playing at 12, it all depends on the person that's running the game. They call him the Dungeon Master. It all depends on the Dungeon Master. Some people who DM, they're really good at it, and some people think they're really good at it. I've had my friend's father who played. He was great at describing rooms. I mean, he could describe a carpet, and you would actually feel like you were standing barefooted on this carpet. But his battles were not really good. Meanwhile, I had a friend on the other hand that his battles were fantastic, but his description was lacking. It wasn't as good as my friend's father. So the first time I started playing, I was 12 years old, and the guy that was running it, his name was Nick. I didn't like it. I can tell you right now, I turned around and said, "Oh, this stinks. I don't want to play this." And I just kind of walked off. And that's when computers first came out, and I was playing with my friend's computer. And my other friend, Trent, had said to me after the game session, he said, "Listen, I'll show you how to really play this on the weekend, and we can, see if you like it then." And I would say we disappeared into his bedroom Friday night. We came out just to use the restroom, and we came out just to grab something to eat and have snacks, because it brought me, his playing, it brought me to a whole nother world. And I really, really like that. Anybody who plays Dungeons and Dragons, it's a role-playing game. The best way to explain it that I found is like a role. Like, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's really not Conan in real life. In real life, Arnold Schwarzenegger is Arnold Schwarzenegger. But he's an actor. He plays a role of Conan the Barbarian, And that's the same thing with the game. You just letting your imagination take over, And you may have feats or characteristics that are in the game that you just don't have in real life. I've always worn glasses, but in the game, I have 20/20 vision.
Yeah, it was one of the questions my friend said to be sure to ask you was if your characters, as you develop them, do they have an effect on your own personality?
Well, they really don't, because it's funny that you asked that too, because they really don't, as long as your mentals are all aligned up, and that, hey, this is real life, and then when I play Dungeons and Dragons, it's fantasy. There is a movie, made for TV movie. Tom Hanks. Everybody knows Tom Hanks. It was one of his first roles. It was a movie called Mazes and Monsters. It was actually based off a book. And if you watch that movie, the premise is Tom Hanks's character, he loses it mentally, and he actually believes that he is his character from the game. And his friends want to save him from doing harm to himself. They actually use the game, how they would problem solve and troubleshoot in the game, to find his character before he actually does something to himself. It's a great movie. You can find it on YouTube. I mean, it's from the 80s. It's called Mazes and Monsters. It's funny that you asked that too, because in real life, no, our characters didn't take over. But in my first book, the characters in my first book are the characters that we rolled up and created and played for years and years and years when we played Dungeons and Dragons.
The name of that book is
The Ring of Darkness.
What of Darkness? I missed the first word.
I'm sorry, The Ring of Darkness.
Okay. And so those, that's interesting that you would continue to tell the story then of how you played, or, that you created way back when you were younger. Yeah. So, I believe I read that your new book, Honor, is new characters in it. Is that correct?
Right. So my first book was The Ring of Darkness, has the characters in it that are based off of characters that we all role played. So if you ask me, what about this character Calvin? There's a friend of mine actually exists, a guy that was behind Calvin, Davis, and so on. Honor was my second published book, and Honor is a standalone book. It is set in medieval England. It's more of a historical fantasy. The Ring of Darkness is a fantasy adventure based on the lines of like The Hobbit, Dungeons and Dragons, obviously, in Lord of the Rings, so forth like that. The book Honor is based more on House of the Dragon, um, Game of Thrones, the Outlander series, Robin Hood, stuff like that. It's set in medieval England. It does have sexually explicit parts in it. And, back in medieval England, they weren't, let's sack Sir Roger's castle and go back and play level 5 of Fortnite. They didn't have video games back in medieval England. They had other things on their mind. But it does have some sexual explicitness to it. And what I did was I wanted to show everybody not just, the good story behind it, the good medieval story, but also it has a romantic overtone to it. And I wanted to show the difference between when you lust after somebody and when you truly love somebody. So the sexually explicit parts are kind of, the best way to say it is kind of when it gets really raw and you see that lust. And then, of course, when it's cleaned up and, rose petals and, the garden and everything like that, or, the flowers or whatever like that, it's true love,
I see. Well, that's very interesting. That's a topic that we have covered here with my pastor several times. Parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think it was kind of the differences between lust and love. So that's interesting. I'm going to have to get that book out and read it and myself. Thank you for that. Where could you buy that book? At Amazon?
Yeah, so you can purchase both books through Amazon. You can purchase them through Barnes and Nobles. You can go into your booksellers and purchase them. I made it that way. Being a self-published author, they ask you, self-publishing companies ask you, do you want to make the book returnable? You say, yeah. Unfortunately, they charge you to do that. But if you don't make it returnable, then the booksellers will not pick the book up because, the best example is, let's say you're doing a meet and greet and they order 20 books and you only sell 9 books and they decide, hey, we're going to keep 4 books on the shelf. They want to have the ability to return whatever books they choose that haven't been sold or they choose not to keep on the shelf. If they can't return the books, then they won't order them and you have to supply your own books, which it's like a double-edged sword. It works against you because you're trying to make as many sales as possible so the literary agents can see, wow, this guy's got, whatever amount of sales, or this lady's got whatever amount of sales. When you do it like that, when you have to bring your books in, any books that you buy from the self-publishing house do not count as a sale. So your best bet is, what I've learned to do over the years, and it sounds kind of crazy, is if I'm doing an event that's not a book selling event, last year I did an actual Comic-Con. So, they don't have the ability to order the book. I'd actually buy the book at full price from Barnes and Nobles, let's say, and utilize that book to sell instead of buying the book at half price from the self-publisher. The difference being is the Barnes and Nobles sale counts as a sale, and the sale from the self-publishing company does not count towards a sale, does not reflect that in the records.
Okay, that's good information for an author. So how do you choose your characters? How do you develop them?
So what I do is I try to stay realistic. In the Ring of Darkness, the characters, I call them the companions. I try to stay to how the individual that played them in the game, I try to stay to that persona. Now, do I have to, go outside the boundary lines? Of course. And I do that because I really feel like when you build a good character, I feel like you don't want to just tell somebody, and this is kind of cliche, you want to tell somebody, oh, this guy's a nice guy. Oh, this guy's a bad guy. I want you to see for yourself. I want you to make your own judgment on that character. Mm-hmm. I want you to be able to pull yourself in and relate with that character, almost like you just spent the weekend with that person. So the characters for the Ring of Darkness, like I said, I try to stay within the lines of how my friends who played these characters. I go outside the lines a little bit. I'm not going to lie. as far as Honor goes, those characters I actually took from a lot of different personas that I've experienced throughout my livelihood. The two main characters in Honor are basically the main character's name. One of the main characters is Russell, and my middle name is Russell, and I try to play him like this is what I want to do. Remember we spoke earlier, and I said, well, when I play the game, it's a whole totally different persona. And that's what I tried to do with him. I tried to make him a little slightly different persona than my average everyday life. And then the girl Lynn, that is his true love, I just basically play her in a combination of two things. One, different attributes that I have seen and really like from former girlfriends. And the other thing is the way that one of my favorite actresses is Jennifer Lopez, and she actually inspired me writing Honor, because a group of us friends got together. We started BSing. Oh, I'm going to go act in a movie with J-Lo because I've always wanted to be an actor. Oh, yeah, what's it about? What's it going to be about? Where does it take place? So I actually, like, when I write it, I think of, like I said, the better attributes from former girlfriends that I enjoyed. And I think about, like, okay, well, what would Jennifer Lopez do if she was acting in this movie? Now, as far as the bad guys go, the villains, I just try to turn around and make them as evil as possible, but I also try to turn around and make them with a human element. Because even though a person has a mindset and does something wrong, to that person, it may be the right thing to do. But everybody says, wait a minute, that's not the norm, that's wrong. But to that particular person, it's the right thing. So I try to step into that persona and try to look at it. It's a little psychology, I guess, like that you can say, but I'm not a psychologist, so I can't really, I don't want to turn the show into that. You know what I mean?
Right. So, what about the plot? How do you come up with that?
Okay, so what I do is I have a combination of how I write my books. I'll come up with a plot, and I will write the plot down on, let's just say I'm using a white line of paper. I'll write the plot down. I'll write the characters, which, in the Ring of Darkness would be the companions, and I'll write the villains, and I'll make personalities for the villains because I already have personalities for the companions or the heroes. And then what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I want to start at this point, and I'll write down a starting point. And then I'll write down a midpoint of where I want the book to be at in the middle of the book. And then I'll write down the end, because everybody knows how a movie or a book goes. You start from the start and end from the end. And I'll just fill in between there. So an example is I'm writing a book right now. It's a follow-up to The Ring of Darkness. It's my third book. It's going to be the second in that fantasy series because I want to make a fantasy series with the companions. And I've noticed that in writing this book, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to leave this place. And in the back of my mind, these companions go, yeah, but we're not ready to leave yet. We still got unfinished business here. And I kind of let them take over as I'm writing. I kind of step into their persona. And I find that's the best way to write. Like, what would they do? Because I feel like I'm staying real to the character.
That's very interesting. What do you have a favorite character?
In the Ring of Darkness, I can't say I have a favorite one. All of them are pretty much my favorites, even the villains. I think that's because they're so close to my heart, because they're at a time in my life that, was great. I'm born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s, and of course you have the 90s. And the late 80s and, and early 90s is when I really took over being a DM and playing, and these guys rolled these characters. So that time era was it was so fun for me at that time. So I just feel like those guys are close to my heart. Now in Honor, Honor is one of those books like, the characters, they're close, they mean something to me, but they're not as close as the characters from the Ring of Darkness.
do you, or would you say, well, what influences from mythology or history or other genres do you draw from?
I like well, obviously I like the fantasy and I like the world building. That's why like this the Ring of Darkness has its own world. I drew up the whole world, and what's really great is the book I'm working on now. You get to see a little bit more of the world, besides where the area where the adventure takes place. But I love because I love fantasy so much. Fantasy, I'm sorry, because I love that. I love the that medieval stuff. Like I will draw from like Braveheart, Gladiator, the movie Robin Hood, Three Musketeers. Like I'll draw from all them, you know. Um, and I know I feel myself putting it in my fantasy adventure book because I mean obviously it wouldn't be a fantasy adventure if it wasn't. But that's what I feel myself drawing from. Like, okay, what would these characters do? It's easy to say, well, this guy would do this. In today's like this guy would just pull out a gun to defend himself. They didn't have guns back then. Let's figure something else out. Um, or it might be they might be going on a quest or something like that and run into a situation where it's like, yeah, we're going to fight our way out of it, yeah, and you're all going to end up getting killed because there's no way you're going to beat this creature or monster that you fight. Okay, what do we get? Well, how can we work our way around it? How can we talk our way out of it? I like to do that. I like to be like, okay, so what did in Gladiator, what did he do when he was posed with this situation? Oh, okay, yeah, all right. And I won't copy it, but I'll think of like, okay, well, my guys could do this. My characters could do that. So I would say, drawing references. I draw a lot of references from medieval movies. Like I said, Braveheart, which is one of my favorite movies. Braveheart, Gladiator, Troy. I don't know if you saw the movie Troy with Brad Pitt in it. I mean, stuff like that I really draw from. There's an old 80s movie called Highlander. It's fantasy. I draw right from that,
Where do you see this genre of fantasy going into the future?
I think actually, and I read something not too long ago. I didn't fully read it. I just kind of glanced at it because I was in the middle of doing something. But I think fantasy could really, really, really take off. And the reason I say that is because the CGI and the special effects and everything in movies today, in TV today, like especially the movies. I mean, it is levels and levels and levels above what it was back in the 80s, and the 80s seemed like it was very hard. I'm sorry, not very hard, but very high with fantasy movies, and I just think like, man, now you got like Game of Thrones that came out, House of the Dragon. I mean, and these are award-winning movies that people like billions of people watch on a regular. Like, oh yeah, Game of Thrones is on. I got to be in front of my TV on Sunday. So I just feel like because of the CGI, fantasy is really gonna skyrocket. Skyrocket into the stratosphere. I really do.
Is there a particular age group that is more interested in fantasy, do you think,
I think all age groups are. Speaking from experience, when I go to a meet and greet book signing, I sell more Ring of Darkness than I sell Honor. And I think the only reason that that's true is because Honor has sexually explicit material in it that I will not turn around and try to push that book on somebody who's under 18 years old. In fact, I went to a Barnes & Nobles and was actually in a debate with a woman for like 35 minutes trying to talk her out of buying the book Honor for her 16-year-old daughter. And there's not too many authors who are going to sit there and tell you, hey, don't buy my book, don't buy my book. It's just that, if I see a 17-year-old girl with 3 kids, yeah, she knows what's going on. I don't mind, trying to sell the book to her. I think the Ring of Darkness sells more because the range is broad. It's a broader range. It's from young adult to adult. I've had 13-year-old kid buy it. I had a 72-year-old neighbor that when it first came out bought it and loved it. So I feel like the range and age from one book, from the Ring of Darkness, from young adult to adult is much greater than me trying to narrow it and say, okay, this is an adult book. When Honor first came out, 2019, we did a book signing every Saturday from the last Saturday in September to the weekend before Christmas. And that book sold 55, 60 copies. And we were doing it just on Saturdays, 55, 60 copies. The Ring of Darkness sold like 10 or 15 copies more. Because of who, the range of people that you can sell it to. I have no problem. When I go into a book signing, I don't never use a chair. I never ask for a chair. I never sit down. I never sign seated. To me, that's Stephen King, James Patterson level. Your fans are going to want to come to you. R.A. Salvatore, Bob Salvatore is a fantasy author, an award-winning fantasy author out of Massachusetts. People go to see him. I went to a book signing and there had to be, this is like 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night on a Saturday. There had to be like at least 70-something people there. He did a little talk about his book, and then he signed. He spent time with everybody. I went there. I didn't get home. That was in Maine. I didn't get home. Sorry, that was in New Hampshire. I didn't get home till like 1 o'clock in the morning. And the book signing started at 7. And
wow, a long day.
Yeah. I mean, he just spent time with everybody. And I'm not at that status yet. I'm not at the status where I can just sit down and my people are going to come to me looking for the book. Do I want to get there? Of course I do. I'm at the status of I don't want a chair. I've got what I call sell sheets, which give you basically the synopsis on a piece of paper. And I go over to the fantasy sections when I'm in the store. I go over to the young adult sections when I'm in the store. I approach people. If you look at me and look away and never look back, I will say hi to you, but I will never say, hey, you interested in fantasy? If you look at the table that I have the setup and you keep looking at me, then you might be interested. I might need to talk to you. So I feel like that's the difference. Like I go out looking for potential readers who love fantasy, whereas a lot of authors and even published authors, they just kind of sit there. I mean, like I said, I'm not at that James Patterson, Stephen King, R.A. Salvatore level yet,
Mm-hmm. That's very good. I have experienced some of that myself. And if you just sit there, the people really need you to be outgoing, talk to them first, maybe, and then you kind of draw them in and they get interested and they want to know more. But if you just sit there like a bump on a log and your books are displayed, maybe they'll glance at you and keep walking, or they might stop and talk to you, but it's more likely they're just going to glance and go on their way. The best experience I had was when I had little candies and wrappers spread on the table, because the children would come over and then I could start talking to their parents.
Yeah, that's a smart idea, because when I do a setup, depending on the time of year it is, if it's Christmas, I have a nice Christmas setup. I might wear usually wear a Christmas sweater. I used to wear a Frosty the Snowman top hat. And I can't tell you how many people come over to the table because I say to them, I know you like my hat. And they go, yeah, what are you selling? And then they get interested. I just feel like that's a better way. Like you said, Halloween time, I candy on the table. I've had a lady come over one time. I was in a Barnes & Nobles in Framingham, Massachusetts. She came over and she said, listen, I'm not a big fan of fantasy genre, but can I have some candy? I said, sure. This lady had to be in her 30s. I said, yeah, go ahead, no problem. That's why the candy's there, like you had said. If the parent comes over with the kid, it may be enough to keep the kid busy so the parent can actually talk to you and maybe show some interest and actually purchase your book. And I feel like that's a fantastic idea,
Do you find or mostly go to book signings where you're the only author there, or are you put in with a group of them?
I've done both. I've done author panels and I've done single solo book signings. As far as the author panels go, I like it, but you got to have some thickness to your skin, because sometimes there's people that come in. I've experienced where I was in an author's panel with an author who actually had an agent, and she was getting ready to go on a book tour. She was from Providence, Rhode Island. We were in Middletown, Rhode Island, and I think there was her, myself, and like 3 other authors. And I think each one of us self-published authors who didn't have an agent sold, if we were lucky, 1 or 2 books. She sold out, and I was like, wow, this lady should have came and did a solo event, but author panels are fantastic, and I like them because when I see a self-published author, I actually try to pick up their book. If it's a kid's book, then I can give it to my nephew. At the time, before, I used to give it to my niece, who's now older. If it's fantasy books, obviously I keep them. I don't get into reading all these books that I purchase, only because I have my own set idea, and I don't want to have someone influence me with something that they put in their book. But I'll do that on an author panel. I find the solo events work better because you're by yourself and you're able to go out and engage and interact with the customer, whether they come to the table to see you or you have to go out and find them. Author panels, you might have it where the last author panel I was at was a woman who survived the Holocaust, wrote a book. She was very popular in the last few years up because she did a lot of work with the local schools and so forth in Rhode Island. There was a lot of people coming in to see her and to support her and to buy her book. People who didn't have her book bought her book. And I'm fine with that. I think that's great. I love it. I was going to get together with another author, and we were going to do what we call a fantasy phenom. He actually moved to Hawaii, so that's not going to happen. But he had said to me at one time, he said, well, what if I sell 5 books and you don't sell any? Who cares? I've learned over the years, just because someone does not buy a book right then and there does not mean they do not purchase your book.
Right. I read somewhere where it takes 7 times for them to see your book. Maybe look at it the first time, maybe finally pick it up and take a look and, shuffle through the pages. But can you imagine if that happens, that's a lot of times that they've been in that bookstore or wherever and saw your book. I was somewhere just recently, and we were talking, and then I got my card out and gave it to them, and it's got a picture of my book on it, and they said, I've seen this somewhere. This looks familiar. So, yeah. Well, it probably is. I hope it is, especially with my podcast now. That helps a lot too.
To me, the biggest thing for a self-published author is to get exposure. And that's really what works against most of us, because in the area that I'm from, you build a relationship with the managers for the booksellers. You build a relationship with Barnes and Nobles, or the mom and pop bookseller. You build a relationship with them. But if you was out in California, say, and said, hey, what about this book? People aren't going to know because you're limited to where you are. You know what I'm saying? You walk into Barnes and Nobles, let's say, and they have a table, and it's got all these books on it, but your book won't be on it. Even though it's say the whole table's fantasy, and it's all fantasy books, there's a good chance that your book will not be on it because people do not know who you are. If you said, hey, T.R. Michaud and Stephen King, I can guarantee you everybody's going to know Stephen King. There'll be a couple of people who know me, but everybody will know Stephen King, and that, I feel, is the problem with self-publishing, is the exposure. A lot of self-publishers will, oh yeah, we can market your book, we can do this, we can do that for $5,000. You're self-published because you don't have $5,000, off the rip. You know what I mean?
Right. That was my next question. I was forming in my mind is why would an author be a self-published author?
Right. So I think a lot of us become self-published authors because of a couple of different reasons. One, and this was actually proven by Owen King, Stephen King's son, when he came out with his book. I think it was Sleeping Beauties. I think he was on a podcast or he was on a talk show or whatever like that, and he said it best. The literary agents do not want to give the newcomers a shot. For some reason in their mind, they think like, oh, Stephen King's gonna ring my phone tomorrow and he's gonna want a literary agent. Reality, Stephen King has a literary agent. He's very satisfied with the guy that he's had for multiple years, or the woman he's had for multiple years. And the only way he's gonna call you is if that person retires or that person unfortunately passes away. Because I'm sure, it's like everything in life. Once you know somebody, you build a relationship with somebody, you're going to just keep going to him. If you hire a carpenter and he comes and fixes your house, oh man, I love this guy's work. The next time you want a carpenter, that's the first person you're going to call. Oh man, I need to get my car fixed. And here's this woman comes out, she's got a ponytail and she fixes your car up better than it's ever been fixed before. If something goes wrong with your car, you're calling the woman with the ponytail. You know what I mean? So Owen King said that on a podcast. A few literary agents said, no, that's not true. That's not true. He sent his book out under a different name, a pen name, and they got the denial letters. When they found out it was him, oh no, we want to get you. No, too late. I'm going to go with my dad and my dad's agent. That's as far as I know. I mean, that's not written in stone because I didn't talk to Owen King myself. But I think the problem is a lot of literary agents do not want to give the newbies a shot. So therefore, the self-publishers now have come out because basically, you being an author, if you have the money to pay the self-publishers, they'll publish the phone book. You know what I mean? They don't care what's in the text or what's in the story or anything. They'll publish it. Just pay me. I had a self-publishing company say to me, hey, what do you think about getting a book on the New York Times bestseller list? Wow, that'd be fantastic because then that's publicity. You're out there, maybe things will happen for you. Great. Oh yeah, pay us $5,000. I'm not paying $5,000 to get on a list. I want to get on the list because of what I wrote and people enjoy what I wrote, not because I paid you $5,000. And then that brings forth another question. Well, how many people are actually on the best-selling list that have, books out there that really aren't that good, but they had the $5,000 to get there? You know what I mean? So I think that's why self-publishing is very, very popular right now because it allows more access to people who would get denied for whatever reason. I've tried agent queries with both of my books and nothing's happened. I've had anybody bite on it. And I don't get down because I've been told by a lot of people, oh, these books are fantastic. You have people that give reviews and so forth. In the Ring of Darkness, the book is dedicated to one of the co-creators of Dungeons & Dragons, a guy named Gary Gygax. His son, Ernest Gary Gygax Jr. I got him a copy of each book. He read the book. He loved it so much he wrote a review on the hardcover of The Ring of Darkness. That was when the pressure's on because this is a guy who test played characters for this game, Dungeons & Dragons, and you're dedicating it to his dad. So the pressure's really on because if the book stinks, then you're going to know about it. So yeah, self-published authors will publish anything, and, as long as you have the money. Do I still send out agent queries? I do. Do they still get denied? They do. That's why I go to self-publishing because I got a story and I want the story to be told, which is I want to tell the story and I want someone to read it. I want someone to enjoy, what I've enjoyed.
Right. Yeah, I have a friend who said, well, they buy are on Audible and buy quite a few books, but usually they don't buy new authors. What would you say to that? And yeah, I look, come on, how about giving the rest of us a break here,
Well, it's funny because when I first did The Ring of Darkness, I went through a self-publishing company. I fired them in 2021. It was a battle every way through them. Now, the book was 80% complete. I have a graphic designer who had the cover was complete. All they had to do was format it and print a copy. Basically, they didn't have to edit it. They didn't have to do anything like that. It was already done. It cost me $4,000 to do it. It took them 9 months to do it, which was to me ridiculous. They were supposed to do a commercial for it. It's a fantasy book, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we got your commercial." It was a Friday night. I got home from work. I tapped on the commercial. The commercial showing like soldiers in Baghdad with guns and M16s. I called them right up. I left a message. Get that, commercial down, that trailer. I don't want that trailer. And they never fixed it. But when I first did the book, they wanted to charge like $28 for this book, softcover book. Oh no. I may be an author, but I'm also a consumer. I buy books of authors that I like. I buy, like everybody, I buy other stuff. I'm a consumer. And I would not sell that book for $28. In fact, there was a fight, and to the point where eventually they said, "Well, what do you want to sell it for?" I said, "I want to sell it for the same price that James Patterson's selling his new book that's out there." And at the time it was $16.99. And I got it to $16.99. Now, did that mean that I ended up losing money on royalties? I did lose money on royalties, but I wanted to make it so that way, you walk into a store and you go, "Listen, I'm not paying." Who wants to walk into a store and say, "I'm going to take $28 on a newcomer that I've never heard of. I hope that I like that book. With the $28, I can buy 3 books from my favorite author that I know I'm going to like." So I kind of looked at it like that. Like I said, in 2021, I fired the self-publishing company, and I actually, the guy who moved to Hawaii that I spoke about earlier, the other fantasy author, he formatted it. He does all his own work himself. He formatted my book. I uploaded directly to Ingram's. No middleman, no self-publishing company, no literary agent, no middleman. Now, I still want to get a literary agent, don't get me wrong, but there's no middleman to that book. I don't have to worry about any type of marketing fees. I don't have to worry about any type of return fees, anything like that. It's just me and Ingram's.
Do you have it on other booksellers online besides Amazon, or do you just use Amazon?
I got Amazon. I got Barnes and Nobles. They always tell me like there's like these 3 or 4 little things. I guess they're bigger companies. I'm not exactly sure, because in my mind, I kind of set myself for Barnes and Nobles and Amazon. I have Ring of Darkness on Audible. It's an audiobook. I like Amazon the best. And I'm not trying to throw shade at Barnes and Nobles or anything. I just don't feel like Barnes and Nobles goes full in to help self-published authors. That being said, years back, there was a manager from Warwick, Rhode Island, Barnes and Nobles. She was awesome. She made up a table of all self-published authors. When you walk into Barnes and Nobles, they get them table. She had gone above and beyond for self-published authors, and she's not there no more. That's a sad part. She ended up leaving during the COVID year. But I like Amazon. And I'm working on trying to figure this out with Barnes and Nobles. I like Amazon because if you go to Amazon to purchase the book, it may be on sale. Sometimes Amazon does their own sales. So it doesn't hurt the author or anything. The author's still going to make their royalties. They're still going to make their sale, which is important. But the book itself is going to be cheaper. So the Ring of Darkness right now, since I took over, it's $15.99, not $16.99. It's $15.99 now. And you may go on Amazon and find it for like, okay, we're selling it for $10.99 today, which is fantastic. I'm looking into Barnes and Nobles about trying to get it where I can take advantage of books being on sale. I can take advantage of, buy one, get one half off. Because right now, you can't, as a self-published author right now, I can't do that. So I'm looking into how can I get to that level, that area that Barnes and Nobles is going to offer this book for sale. Because then, once again, books on sale. You're going to have more people buying it on sale, taking a chance at an author they really don't know about.
What would you advise a new author who has a book for sale and they're trying to decide whether to go self-published or try to get a traditional publisher, and if it's self-published, then what's your first step?
I would say, one, be prepared to have some thick skin. Send out all these agent queries of all these agents that you want to represent you and represent the genre you're writing about. Expect a denial letter. Expect it. You never know. You might get a letter that says, hey, we're interested in your book. Can we talk? Which is fantastic. If you don't get that letter, like what I do is I send out, I don't know, I might send out 20 agent queries, 25 agent queries. If I get back negative answers, that's when I decide to self-publish. As a self-published author, one, have thick skin and don't jump at every offer that comes to you, because a lot of offers that come to you are other self-publishing companies that want to take your money away from the other company that has your money. They're not trying to really help you. They just want to, they're in it for the business for themselves. They're not in it to help you out. So be careful of that. This happened to me recently within the last few months. I got a email from a gentleman pretending to be somebody else who's a famous literary agent who works in England. And when I saw the name, I said, wait a minute, that guy's in England. Did he come over to the U.S.? Because last I knew he was in England. So I looked up the guy, and yeah, he's still in England. He's still a literary agent over there. So this guy posed as a literary agent, sent me an address, not realizing I'm going to put the red flag up and I'm going to start looking into the address. The address was for a law office down in North Carolina. And then he tried calling me several times to try to get me to sell him the manuscript, to sell him the manuscript for The Ring of Darkness. I said, well, let me look into it. Let me study you a little more. Let me research you a little more. Yeah, okay, no problem. But you might have Hatchet Book Group call you. Now, Hatchet Book Group is one of the top 5 traditional publishing houses in the nation, as far as I know. Mm-hmm. And somebody did call me from them, like within 45 minutes of talking to this original gentleman who was posing as a literary agent. And, well, what if we offer you $300,000 for the book? First of all, nobody's going to offer you $300,000. So just think about it. Nobody's going to offer you the amount of a house for a book. Mm-hmm. So automatically the red flags came up. I actually reached out to Hatchet Book Group, and the woman I spoke with, a young lady, they've never heard of this guy who's posing to be the literary agent. They had sent me paperwork that I had sent to Hatchet, the actual real Hatchet, sent to this young woman, who then forwarded it to her legal team. Come to find out it was this big scam that they're running. And the legal team now is after these guys because they've done it to a few other people. So anybody who's offering you money to buy your book, don't do it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I want to thank you for coming and talking with us about your book today. And I want to thank the audience for listening to us. And before you go, I want to mention next week I have another author coming in, Steve Kidd, and he's a marketing expert. But before we go on, and as we end here, TR, tell them one more time how they can learn more about you and get your books.
Okay, so I do have some business pages on the Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's TR Michaud, Michaud -author. And if you go on there, you go on the Facebook website or whatever, it tells you about my books. You can look at it. I try to keep everybody updated. Or you can go to Amazon or Barnes & Nobles and look for The Ring of Darkness, fantasy adventure, or Honor, which is a historical fantasy.
Okay, thank you very much, and I appreciate again, and I'll see you next week, and thank you, everybody, for listening today.
Thank you, Mrs. Wagner.
You're very welcome. Glad to meet you.
Nice to meet you also. Thank you.